Hello, Fearless Gamers! Matt here for Fearless Games, and today I'm doing another entry in the Book Corner. This time, the book of the day is going to be The Path of the Seer by Thorpe. This is Book 2 in the Path of the Eldar series, which will then be concluded in the recently released book Path of the Outcast. This book is focused on the friend of Conundrel's named Thyrina, who goes down the path of the Seer. Now, the interesting thing is this book is basically going on in the same timeline as Path of the Warrior. But thankfully, events that she was a part of during Path of the Warrior, he kind of glazes over. More like, oh yeah, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened. Focuses primarily on what her feelings were and what she felt, her thoughts on the situation and events at hand, and then move on from there. That way you're not really reading the same book over again for a large chunk of it. In most times, the events that happened in Path of the Warrior, which tend to be about maybe 5 or 6 pages, he does in about max 2.5 pages, sometimes 3, depending on how much deeper he goes into her side of the story arc. But the actual events that Conundrel, or Calandrel, however you want to pronounce it, is very minimal in comparison to what they were in the original book, Path of the Warrior. In terms of interesting stuff that's introduced into this, you get a very unique look at the Sphere and how, for a lack of a better word, Eldar government runs, or like their war councils, how they operate and how they delegate, tasks, and how they come to decisions on what to and not to deal with as a threat and such. You get a bit more insight in of Thyrina here, and you have a better understanding on her perspective, so you get more of an informed opinion, which allows you to then decide if you like Calandrel or if you like Thyrina, because in Path of the Warrior, it was very focused on Calandrel's point of view, so his point of view kind of taints your vision of her, whereas this book puts it in her perspective, and then you kind of get an equal part of both, and then can decide who you thought was, in the wrong or in the right, which is really nicely done. You also get a nice look at how they view psychic powers and traversing through the warp. You discover how they travel through the warp, how the Infinity Circuit works, and how they use their psychic powers in their ruins, and how they train themselves to being becoming Spheres, and also warlocks. It's actually really cool, and they put in an interesting thing about warlocks, and how Eldar that were formerly Aspect Warriors do the transition between Aspect Warrior to Warlock, and it's actually really informative and a nice little insight. The one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't make you want to play Psykers more in Eldar. Like, where Path and the Warrior, you're kind of like, maybe I can write this in and try and wiggle in an extra squad of striking scorpions. Where in this one, you're not really like, you don't think less of the Sphere, but you're not like really jazzed to play Spheres more in your army because of the book. It does show an interesting concept of how Spheres and Warlocks do combat when they're on the front lines, and how they perceive the battlefield and stuff like that, which is really awesome. And as in Path of the Warrior, this bleeds up to a grand battle with the Faith of Altiok hanging in the balance, and you get to see what she was doing while Conundrel was off doing his own thing, which is pretty awesome. And you also get a really cool idea of how Wraithguard and Wraith Lords are utilized, and how the Spheres are perceiving with them when they're guiding them. You also get a really interesting view of what the Spheres and the Eldar and the Warlocks kind of experience when they're in proximity of a D-cannon-based weaponry. One thing that some people will probably, call out on in this is one thing that involves a Titan, mainly because Forge World kind of debunks it, but, it's neither really here nor there. and it's just big like a passing moment, and you're just like, oh, well, okay, but you know, you can forgive it for that because I think this book was written before the new Titan was made. But it does introduce some pretty cool weaponry that I would love for Forge World to build if they ever do accessories for the Phantom Titan. And the story arc in general is really interesting. You're well engaged throughout the whole story, and I feel like, you know, that I was just as entranced by this as I was the original book. And I'm really excited to read up what Path of the Outcast has to offer and see how this all ends. It does also throw in a really cool appearance of a character that I wasn't expecting to see in the book, but I liked what they were doing with it, and it kind of got me intrigued a little bit to look more into this character. Other than that, there really isn't much to say about the book, except that if you liked Path of the Warrior and you're really into Eldar, then definitely pick up this book. It continues off with the awesomeness of the first book without losing any steam. It was a real page-turner. I never found myself just going, okay, oh, finally this part is up, that means I am almost halfway through, you know. It's just as engaging without feeling boring or repetitious, or just as feeling of I'm reading this because I just feel obligated at this point. It captures your interest from the very beginning and holds it to the very end, just like Path of the Warrior. So if you're in need of a new book, definitely pick this up. If you haven't picked up Path of the Warrior already, you know, pick that up as well, and then continue on with this book. You can still get it at Borders, if they're still around. I think they're only online now. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all those good places, as well as the Games Workshop website. So, that's all for now. Until next time, Fearless Gamers, take care!